All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. I appreciate your patience as we get started. Welcome to our first Collaborate, Innovate, and Accelerate web series webinar. We'll be running these throughout the year, so hopefully you'll come back and join us for some more. My name is Joel Gress with Dynamic Tech Services. With me today is Stephanie Gamber from Solver, who will be presenting BI360. Before we get started, we have some housekeeping items to address. All attendees are joining in listen-only mode, so please submit your questions in the question window or the chat box. We'll do our best to monitor both. If those questions we'll try to address during our Q&A session toward the back end of the webinar today. Anything we don't get to during today's session, we'll be happy to reach out to you and answer your questions directly, but also feel free to reach out to me directly, joel.gress@dynamictsi.com. Please also come to our events page so that you can see some of the future events that we have. As I mentioned today, we'll be looking at BI360, but we're going to have a series of events throughout the year. So go to dynamictechservices.com/events, and you'll be able to see all the events as they're coming up. The solution we're seeing today, which is BI360, is compatible with both Acumatica Cloud ERP and Microsoft Dynamics SL. So regardless of which solution you're using, you're in the right place, which is good news. And Solver, or BI360, also supports many other ERP systems. The agenda is pretty straightforward today. Stephanie will introduce you to Solver as a company and then discuss the value of BI360 to your organization. She'll then move into a demo of BI360 and we'll close with the Q&A session. All right. Well, without further delay, I'll turn the meeting over to Stephanie Gamber from Solver.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So before I jump into the product demonstration, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Solver and who we are. So we have over 140 employees, 2,600 customers and growing. And you can see that we have a number of locations across the globe. And if you move over to the next slide, we can see exactly where those locations are at. So I'm based out of our USA office here in West Los Angeles, which is the headquarters for our management and our development. But those little green icons, those indicate other locations of Solver offices across the globe. And we've been in business for over 20 years, and we have customers in over 40 countries. Perfect, and this is just a little bit of an overview of what we will be showing today within BI360. So BI360, we have budgeting capability, and with both our budgeting and reporting, this is Excel-based design, but your end users are going to have the web-based input for creating their budget and for running reports. So you have a little bit of the best of both worlds with Excel and with the web-based format. We're going to look at some financial operation reports as well, and then also take a look at the data warehouse and some of the data sources that you would potentially be leveraging within the BI360 data warehouse. And I think if you press one more, we also have a little blurb on visualization. So we have a connector to Power BI. So if anyone is using Power BI, this is a great way to have some data visualization off of BI360 and all of the data that you have within your BI360 data warehouse. And just a quick overview on the architecture, if you want to go to the next slide here. So this is essentially what we'll be looking at. So I mentioned reporting, budgeting in dashboards, which is via Power BI. And this all lays on top of the BI360 data warehouse. And within the data warehouse, you're able to consolidate multiple data sources. So we talked about Acumatica and SL as being some of the ERPs that we connect to. Also SAP, other Dynamics ERPs, other ERPs, legacy ERPs that you might have data in as well as additional cloud data sources and operational data sources. So the first thing that I'll show you when we get into the product demo is just a little bit of an overview of how that would work, and then we'll jump into some reporting off of that data and then also take a look at budgeting as well. So I moved through that pretty quickly so that we could get right into the product and take a look at BI360. So with that, we will jump right into our product demonstration, and I'll take you on a grand tour of BI360. All right, so I just shared my screen, so everyone should be seeing that right now. So,
Yes.
perfect. All right, always good to have confirmation. So this is the login screen, which is how your users will access BI360. And this can be done via any web browser. Right now, I happen to be using Internet Explorer. Sometimes I use Chrome. This is really up to you and your preference. So when you first log into BI360, it's going to take you to this home screen. And what you'll see here on the left-hand side are all of the available modules, and this is really going to depend on your level of access. Right now, I've logged in as an administrative user, so I'm able to see many different things that maybe a standard report consumer end user wouldn't see. So I have things such as settings, budgeting, reporting, all of these various modules, and we'll take a look at each of those as we progress through the demo. But before we do that, the first thing I wanted to touch on was data and what types of data you might want to bring into BI360 so that you can create consolidated reports or reports off of different data sources all in one location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this data warehouse module. And the first thing you're going to see here on the screen, you're going to see different types of data that we've brought into our BI360 demo model, and this is very representative of what we see from our customers. So each of these types of data, we have accounts payable, accounts receivable, you have your general ledger data, you may have data from different operational systems, CapEx, Google Analytics. These are all modules within BI360, and these are very, very easy to customize and configure based on what you want to bring into the system. So in this case, for example, if we're looking at accounts payable, these are some of the key dimensions that we're bringing in. We're bringing in vendor information. We might be associating that with an account and a department so we can see how that ties back to the general ledger. All of this is pre-configured, but still fully customizable to what fields you want to see. So you're able to easily add a new type of module based on the information that you're going to need for reporting and budgeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just an overview of our integrations and the data that we can load into BI360. So I'm going to click on integrations, and I'm going to go to add new. And where I'm at right now is the BI360 Marketplace. So within the BI360 Marketplace, I'm able to see all of the pre-configured connectors that we have for BI360 Cloud. So in this case, you'll see that we have a number of different ERPs. We have the ability to load data from a flat file, from a CSV file. Here's Acumatica. We also have a SQL connector for any type of SQL database that you may have where you're storing internal data that you would like to report off of in BI360, as well as our gateway connector, which is for any on-premise data source that you need to load into BI360. So this is how you're able to take information from various types of systems with various structures and consolidate it all in BI360 so that you're reporting and budgeting in one location with access to all of that information. So once that data is in BI360, the next thing we want to take a look at is reporting. So what I want to show you is the end user reporting experience, and then we'll cover a little bit more of the power user experience. So I'm going to start off by going to the BI360 archive here. So I'm going to click on this module. And what you see here, this should remind you a little bit of an inbox, of an email inbox. And that's the way that we designed it, because we wanted it to be very easy for end users to log into the system and see any reports that have been shared with them, and also to be able to identify which reports may be new that they haven't yet had a chance to view. So in this case, we can see that I have a number of reports in my inbox, and I have this one is highlighted, so it looks like I have a new report here to view. And anytime I have a new report shared with me, I can also receive a notification that I have a report to view. It's here in BI360, as well as I can receive an email notification on that too. So I know to log into the system. But the nice thing is that all of my reports are then stored in this centralized location, so there's no digging through my email trying to find the latest and greatest version. So I'm going to take a look at this P&L that has been shared with me and see what we have here. So what you'll notice with this profit and loss report is that in addition to having some standard financial information down here along the rows where we have our revenue and expenses, we also have some formatting, and this is all courtesy of Excel, because with BI360, as I mentioned, the design experience is fully in Excel. So anything that you can do if you're adding charts, graphs, conditional formatting, that can all be built into your report templates, and then the reports ultimately can be distributed to users via the web interface. So in this case, maybe I want to take a look at my revenue number here. And I see that I have a pretty sizable variance. So if I want to get a little bit more information on that, even though I'm an end user and I myself didn't run this report, I'm still connected live to the BI360 database. So at any point, I can drill down on underlying information, and I can see what comprises that number. What is that number made up of? So if I'm looking at this and something is out of line with what my expectations would be, I can drill down into any underlying journal entries and see what those transactions are. So that's the end user experience. An end user can also download a report into Excel if they would like to view it that way. So let me just click on that here for you really quickly. And a nice thing when you are in Excel with any report that's coming down from the portal is that you maintain any formulas that are built into the report. So in some cases, many tools will hard code those values into the file. And if you make an adjustment, you won't see the impact of that. But here with BI360, you're preserving any formula that's in the report itself. So if you're doing maybe a little bit of what if analysis and you want to see what that adjustment looks like rolling through your financial statements, you can do that very easily right here. So I'm going to close that out and go right back to the web portal. So that's your end users. Those are your users who are pure consumers of reports. These are users that you don't necessarily want in the system running reports on demand themselves. Maybe you might be mid closing the books at the end of the month, and these users should wait until that's completed and you want to distribute the reports to them. Or it could be maybe someone where you have a daily sales report that's being sent out and they receive that every morning. And this process of distributing reports, it can be fully automated with the BI360 publisher. So for an example, if you had 50 different location directors that were receiving a copy of a report, they could each receive a different version of that based on their location in their BI360 archive every morning on an automated basis without anyone having to run that for them. So I'm going to click here on live reporting, because live reporting, this is now on-demand reporting. So these are for users where you want them to be able to be in the system running reports anytime throughout the day, refreshing information, refreshing numbers, and getting that data on demand. This would also be something that your power users would have access to. So you can see here we have a number of different reports when I'm in live reporting. And the way that we have this set up is that they're organized by categories. So here on the left-hand side, if I click on any of these categories, it's going to refine the view of reports that I can see to the ones that fit in a specific category. And these categories make it really easy for you to share reports with your different user groups. So as an example, if I have a number of financial reports, anytime I create a new financial report, I can add it to this category, and any users that have access to this category will then have access to this report. So you can really maintain the types of reports for different users via the categorization here. Also, if you have a really large report library, which we do here in our demo model, you can search for a specific report. If you know the name of the report, you can just start to type that in and it'll pull it up accordingly. So that's a good way to find what you're looking for if you're dealing with a lot of different reports on an ongoing basis. So I'm going to show you the on-demand reporting and what that will look like for more of a power user. So I'm going to click on this P&L variance report with comments and give you a little bit of a view of that. So you can see here up on top, we have report parameters. So when we were in the archive, we had a report that was distributed to us, and that report was preset. We weren't able to make any changes, but as a user that has access to live reporting, I'm able to modify this. So if I wanted to run a report here for maybe a different entity, I could select that here from my parameters box. Maybe I wanted to run it for US or a different entity. And this, of course, is all dependent on what I have security access to, but in this case, I have access to multiple entities. If I wanted to choose a different scenario, maybe we have a budget version, and then we have a few updated forecasts throughout the year, I could change that here as well. And I could also change the period that I'm viewing this information for. So I have full access to control the output of the report based on how it's designed. So in this case, we've created a profit and loss variance report. So again, you can see some of that Excel functionality with some conditional formatting, but we also have a comment input section here. So this allows your users to, in addition to just viewing a report, they're able to input some specific variance comments that's then stored with that data. So next month, when you're reviewing the financial statements, you can pull in anything that's been stored in BI360, any type of comment, and reference this. So you don't have this information that's maybe floating around on a shared drive or an email. It's stored with the data in the data warehouse, with this period, with this scenario, with this entity, and it's all there and accessible for you to identify what those discrepancies were next time you're looking for them. Any report that I, as a power user, am looking at, I have the ability to share with other users or to send to my own archive as well if I want to track the output that way. And again, of course, I have that same ability to export anything to Excel. I'm going to go back to the main screen here of live reporting and just touch on a couple things when it comes to creating a new report. So all of these reports, again, these were built in Excel, but one nice thing is that once you have a report created, if you want to create a similar report, it's very easy to take an existing report and modify that. So in this case, we have a P&L by department by month. Maybe I want to use that same P&L structure, but I want to have a year-over-year view or maybe a trailing 12-month view. What I would do is select the report that I would like to duplicate, click this duplicate button here, enter a new name for that report, and it's going to take me right into the design experience, and I would be able to make those modifications very easily. So you'd be 95% of the way there, and instead of building a new report, you're just making a few adjustments to the formatting so that you have a different view of that report. And that can be done with any of these reports. In some cases, you might want to start from scratch and you have the capability to do that as well. But oftentimes you can leverage some of the work that's already done to really streamline that report building process. So that's just a quick overview of live reporting and how that would work for your users. I'm going to move on to budgeting and workflow. And with budgeting and workflow, we're still, anytime we see a budget template, what you essentially have is a report with some additional functionality built into it to store that information to the BI360 data warehouse database. So it all ties in very much together. So the way that I want to start with showing you budgeting and forecasting is via the budgeting module here. So the budgeting module, this is going to be what your budget administrator, what their view would be. So you can see that this is very, very similar to what we saw with live reporting. Again, as we categorize our reports, we can categorize our budget forms. But what I wanted to show you here was just a little bit of a budget process overview and what we might typically see with one of our customers and one of our deployments. So this is a pretty detailed list of a potential customer's budget process. And you can see that it starts from entering things like corporate goals and departmental goals via a strategy and goal template in BI360, creating a top-down departmental forecast, and then entering those assumptions and drivers that are ultimately going to create the budget. So those are some of those pre-budgeting sort of setup tasks that really set the stage to create a budget. And then from there, you might have your budget users, department managers, individuals that have particular areas of responsibility actually inputting portions of the budget. So I want to show you this process and sort of walk through this so you can see how that would flow from end to end. So I'm going to click on assignments. So the budgeting module that we've been in, this is more for your administrator, but the way that the end users are going to access BI360 is via this assignments module. So when I click on assignments, I'm able to see any workflows that have been set up where I'm assigned a task. So each of these could be considered sort of a subtask. Most often, what you'll see is that at any given point, someone that's involved in the budget or forecast process may have one workflow that's open and assigned to them. Since this is a demo model and we want to show a few different options, I have a number of workflows set up, but that's typically what you would see. So for starters, let's assume that we've entered some corporate strategy and goals. Maybe the next thing we want to do is create a forecast for the remainder of the current year so we can use that to create next year's budget. So I'm going to click on forecast and I'm going to open this departmental forecast template. So this forecast template is configured so that based on the current date that's being selected for the forecast, in this case, it's period 9, I'm going to get actuals through the end of that period, and then I'll be able to update my forecast for the remainder of the year. So this is going to be very dynamic. So if you're forecasting throughout the year, if you're reforecasting each month, each quarter, or more frequently than that, this will be dynamic and you can make those updates. You can have an unlimited number of budget or forecast scenarios. So you can do a lot of comparative analysis and reporting from one version to another if you'd like to see what those changes are and to track those changes. As a user that's inputting my forecast, once I'm happy with my numbers, I can hit the store button and store those changes back to the BI360 data warehouse, and then I can check this finish assignment, and this is all tracked via the workflow. If I have an approver that's going to be approving my changes, they'll then be notified to go into the system and to make any updates or to just approve those changes. And I'll take you through the workflow process after we go through the assignments here. So once we have that forecast in the system, you might want to create a baseline for your budget. So this is a way to create a quick top-down budget. So I'm going to pull up this template here. And I'm going to put this into full screen mode here so that you can see a little bit of a better view. So this is our profit and loss breakback, and the way that this works is that this is going to look at our historical information, and based on those inputs, it's going to create a forecast or a budget for us just within seconds, just based on an algorithm that's in the system. So in this case, we have actuals year to date, we have a budget for the rest of the year, and then we have our full year forecast. So what we can do is we can input a desired net income, hit enter, and as soon as we've done that, the system's going to create a budget scenario for us. So this gives us a really good starting point for a budget if we want that to really tie into what we have had historically. The nice thing, in addition to just kind of creating it off of that historical information, is that if we know and anticipate that there's going to be some changes in the upcoming year, we can account for that as well within our model. So let's say we know for certainty that we expect an increase in product revenue. I could budget for an increase here, input those values, and everything will adjust accordingly. Same thing if I anticipate maybe a lowered expense. In this case, our marketing expense looks a little bit high. So if I wanted to adjust for that, I could do the same thing and decrease the marketing expense for the year. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom of this template, you will see, oops, almost all the way to the bottom. You'll see my net income number here is going to stay constant at that 3.5 million, which was that ultimate desired output that I wanted to create. So this is just a very quick and easy way to create a baseline or to do some what if scenario creation and analysis if you want to analyze that against a previous budget or the upcoming budget. So from there, let's take a look at the actual budget process for more of the budget end users and how that would be rolled out to them. So the first thing that typically happens is that there's going to be some budget drivers that need to be entered into the system. And a lot of times we see with our customers that this might be done currently in Excel. So there may be a number of linked workbooks and worksheets that anyone might be dealing with at a given time. But when you have assumptions and drivers entered into BI360, these all flow through the various pieces of your budget. So if, for example, you're budgeting payroll and you're entering new payroll tax rates, that would flow into your payroll tax model. And it would, if you make updates here, it's going to update your payroll tax model. Again, down here, we have some assumptions around travel. So if you're budgeting for travel, any changes you make here, this would also flow into an associated travel model that your users might be using. So in this case, if we wanted to enter an average rate for hotels that should be budgeted anytime a user enters a hotel expense, we can control that here. In this case, we're doing it by various entities. So maybe our US office versus our Canadian office, maybe that air travel rate is a little bit different. So we can control that at a pretty granular level based on how you need to budget. So this could be done by location, this could be done by department, this could be done by entity. One of the more common types of drivers that we'll see within any budget model is usually around revenue. So it might be something related to volume or to different product sales, and that can all be managed here through your assumptions and your drivers. So I'm going to show you specifically how some of these drivers flow into our payroll model, because right here we have some payroll taxes. So let's go back to our assignments and dive into the department level manager budget input process. So if I was a budget manager for a specific department, here you can see that this has a little bit more going on with it. The previous ones where we were entering assumptions, there was just one task. But in this case, we have 6 different tasks. So if I click on this, it's going to pull up all of the different areas of responsibility that I've been assigned as a department head for my budget. I can see which tasks are in progress. So in this case, it looks like I've started on my personnel, I've started on my expenses, but I haven't started on capital yet. If I had completed any of these, there would also be another section down here that tells me which tasks have been completed. And the budget managers also have visibility into this through the workflow. So I'm going to open up our personnel model since we were looking at some of those assumptions here. And I'm going to show you how that flows into BI360 and give you an example of a budget model that might be created off of this. So again, I am going to go into more of a full screen mode so that you can see what that looks like. Give us a little more real estate to work with here. So what you're seeing here would be your existing employee information. This is typically coming from a third-party payroll system, maybe ADP or Paychex or another system, or sometimes it's coming from the ERP. But the way that we set these budgets up is we'll take a snapshot as of the time you're creating the budget, and it'll list out all of your employees, their current salary, and any other information that you have in the system that needs to be accounted for with the budget. It's important to note as well that, especially with information like payroll, you're dealing with very sensitive information that you want to make sure is secured and only the right people can access. So that's why there's a lot of granularity and flexibility within BI360 when it comes to security. And when it comes to budgeting and assignments, if I were to try to run this payroll budget for a department that wasn't mine, I wouldn't be able to do so because it's locked down to my user ID and to my specific security departments. So in this case, what you're going to see anywhere is that there's a yellow cell. This is where I, as a user, can input values to create my budget model. And the first thing I want to do is I want to scroll off a little bit here to the right-hand side and show you some of those assumptions that we were looking at on that assumptions form and how they flow into our budget model. So here you can see we have some payroll tax rates, both for FICA and Medicare, and then also here we have our FUTA rate, and this is the rate and then the cap. So for an example with FUTA, we have a 6% rate and a $7,000 maximum. And when we're budgeting that out for the year, you can see that most of our users cap out in January, and then some of them cap out in February. And then after that, we're not calculating those payroll taxes any longer. And this is how that flows into the form. So let's say next year, maybe this rate is adjusted. We would just update our assumptions and it would flow right into this form. So that's how any type of driver and assumption would come through from that centralized model there. I am going to scroll back over to the left-hand side and just show you a few things in this model. And this particular payroll model, a lot of our customers, this suits them very well. We've created this based on, hundreds of budgeting implementations, and we can always add different pieces to it if there's something really specific that you're budgeting for, but this gets most customers most of the way to creating a very detailed and accurate payroll budget. So let's say I'd like to add a new employee this year, and I know that I'm going to be hiring for a new vice president, and maybe we're going to hire them in July, and they are full-time at 2,080 hours with a salary of $175,000 for the year. So once I put that information into the system, you can see that it starts to calculate out the monthly payroll. It's also going to calculate out the payroll taxes. It'll calculate any benefits that we've built into the model. And then ultimately, everything that's built into this model is going to roll up into our general ledger. So down here, you're going to see some of the GL accounts and the totals that are being stored for our budget. So when you're running a financial report, you're going to get this rolled up total, but you'll still have within the system the underlying payroll detail. So you would have the capability to do some actual versus budget all the way down even to an employee level if you chose to. I'm going to click on this activity log as well right here on the right-hand side and just point this out because this allows you to track the budget and any activity or communications that occur during the budget process. So if I wanted to add some notes regarding what I did with my payroll budget, I could enter that here. When I submit my payroll budget and it goes to the next approver, if they have feedback, they can put that in here as well. I can also have additional what are called reviewers, which would be users that are maybe involved in the budget process. They're not necessarily an approver, but they might have input. If they have any commentary or anything to add, that would all be stored here as well. And anyone that's involved with this particular workflow would be able to see that. And the nice thing is this stays with the budget, this stays with the model. So next year when you're budgeting and you can't quite remember why you made that adjustment, you can reference last year's budget and you'll see all of those notes and all of those comments and have access to that. All right, I'm going to show you one more thing within budgeting here that will just give you a little bit of an idea on some of the built-in budgeting functionality. And I'm going to go back to our department level budget. And I've opened here our other expense form. So this is just a general ledger level budget. You can see off here on the left-hand side, I have my operating expense accounts. And if I look over here on the right-hand side, I have actuals as well. So this allows me to, if I'm creating my budget and I want to analyze maybe what this number coming in from the actuals, what makes up that $167,000 to make sure I'm not missing anything for the upcoming budget. I can right click, I can drill down into those actuals, see the underlying journal entries if I would like. And at a very simple level, I can enter just a lump sum by account if I want to, but I also have some additional capability on top of that. So I'm going to click on this spreading and line item details down here at the bottom. And let me pop that into full screen just so you can see that a little bit better. So I had the marketing expense pulled up here. But with the marketing expense, this is a pretty large amount of money each month that we are budgeting. So we might want to break this down into a little bit more granularity, not just have 191,000 as a lump sum. So I can do that with line item detail. If I wanted to break this out by vendor as an example, I can enter as many individual line items that I want that will underlie that GL level budget. And anytime I report off of this, I can pull in this line item detail as a drill down feature or within to the report itself if I want to see it reported at that level. You can also enter additional comments here. So if I wanted to add a comment for each line item, I could do that as well and track those expenses. So that's one built-in feature. I also want to show you, so I'm going to click on a different account here. Let's look at our gifts and donations. So anytime you see this little red triangle, it's going to tell us that that cell already contains line item detail. In this case, I'm going to look at gifts and donations, which doesn't contain any line item detail. So maybe I'd just like to enter an amount for the year and spread that. So I'm able to do that with our spreading tool here. I could enter a lump sum, spread that out over the year. And this can be done via something as simple as an even spread. I can do this based on historical. So if we wanted this based on seasonality or a trend that exists within our data, I could select a historical year to base that off of. I can also adjust any amount. So if I'm just copying the prior year's budget, but I want to increase it maybe by 3%, I could do that here, 2 or 3%, or I could take an amount that I've spread and just make some adjustments here. So there's some built-in flexibility within BI360 to streamline the budgeting process and make it easier. So again, ultimately, once I'm done budgeting, I'll hit that finish assignment. And everything that I've entered in BI360, it's there and it's available for me to report off of on an immediate basis. So maybe you have a preliminary budget and everyone's storing into that preliminary budget. As a budget manager, I can then report off of that immediately and see what the impact of those changes are in the system. Let me go back to I'm going to take a quick tour of the workflow capability here, which is where keeps thinking I'm signed out here. Let me sign back in. All right. So I'm going to show you workflow just really quickly, just to give you an overview of some of the capability there. Because when we were in the assignments, everything that we could see, that was all set up via workflow. So when we were looking at that expense budget and we were looking at that payroll budget, that was that department level annual budget workflow. So as a budget administrator, budget manager, if I were to go into my existing workflows, click on that particular budget and hit the status button, I'd be able to see exactly where we are within that budget process. So I can see which templates have not been started, which are in progress, and which are completed. And then I have a progress tracker over here on the upper right-hand corner. I can do this by individual user. I can do this by specific template. So maybe I want to see who has completed their personnel budget. And I can also do this by status. So if I want to see who has not started on their budget, I can click this option and I can find out who might need to get a little bit of a nudge to get moving on inputting their budget. If I want to create a new workflow, This is also very easy to do, and there's some really nice controls built into this. So as an example here, if I just wanted to say new budget process, I could create a new workflow. Now with any workflow, I can, as I mentioned, I can have an approver assigned. There may be some particular budget steps where you don't necessarily have an approver, so it is optional. And I can also have a reviewer, and that's someone that can participate in the budget process, but they're not necessarily approving the actual budget itself. I also have the ability to set an open and close date for the workflow. So as soon as this close date has elapsed, users can no longer go in and make any changes to the budget, so it effectively locks it down for us. So what I would do is I would just select what templates I want. Maybe I want that personnel template, maybe I want expenses, choose the users that are going to participate in the budget process, and I've set up my workflow, and they'll then have that available to them when they go into their assignments, just as we've seen. All right, so that's the budget workflow process. Now, we also have, once we've input our budget, we might want to further report off of that. So I'm going to take you back to the archive and show you one more feature that we didn't look at when we were first in the archive, and that's called the playlist. So here on the left-hand side, I have the ability to take any reports that have been shared with me and create a playlist out of them. And the playlist is very similar to a formatted presentation, but instead of having PowerPoint, for example, if you're presenting board reports or presenting to the executive team, what you'll have is a live BI360 presentation where you're connected to the database, and if someone asks a question during the presentation and you need to get further information, you can even drill down into that underlying detail. So in this case, let's take a look at the budget presentation, because we've been budgeting and we might want to see what the output of those budget changes that we made, what does that look like? So what I do is I click on the show playlist option, and it's going to pull up this format. So I have here a table of contents for my annual budget analysis. It's going to tell me what reports are included in this playlist. And again, these are all just BI360 reports based on the budget and the actual information coming over from our ERP. And this is set up so what we kind of had in mind when we were creating this was that experience that you have when you're in something like Netflix, where you can easily sort of scroll through these little tabs and see exactly what you're looking for and find that and click on that and open up a new window with that information. So as an example here, let's take a look at strategic KPIs for our budget. So this is taking the information that the users have input into our budget, and we're calculating some of those KPIs. So we're looking at our FTEs, maybe our gross profit, what the budget is, what the goal is, what the variance is. And this would be what's kind of coming down from the executive team when we're setting those initial strategies and goals. We can also analyze some of the comments when we're doing that budget and actual variance analysis. So in this case, we have our budget and our forecast, and we have the variance between the two isolated, and we're pulling in the comments that the users have stored into the system so we can explain what those discrepancies are. Also, here's an example of a budget versus actual and forecast report. This is kind of similar to that P&L that we saw at the beginning. And again, we're pulling in some charts and graphs that we've created in Excel. We're looking at that new budget that we created. So anytime we can refresh this throughout the budget process. If we want a user to go in and make a change to the budget, they'll hit save. And as soon as they do that, that would be reflected here within our report. And again, we can right click on any field at any time and drill down into BI360 to see the underlying transactional level details. So this gives you just another option to have a really nice presentation format without having to copy, paste, move anything into PowerPoint, and to stay live within the system and within BI360. So that takes you on a pretty much a grand tour of the product and everything that I wanted to cover with you. I don't know if during the presentation, if we had any questions or want to maybe kind of go over to that and wrap things up?
Absolutely. We do have a few questions. Let me see if I can share out the right screen this time.
You got it.
There we go. Terrific. Great. So if you have questions, please to enter them into the question box. And Stephanie, we do have a few questions here in the queue already for you.
Oh, good.
Are any report or budget templates provided with BI360?
Yes, so that is a good question. So everything that we saw when we were in live reporting, when we looked at that, we had that large sort of library of reports that was available that was categorized. Those are all available to anyone that is a BI360 user. Now, I will say that you're going to have to do a little bit of tweaking to customize those. For example, your chart of accounts is going to be different than the demo model's chart of accounts, but you can leverage all of the templates within our library to get you well on your way to having a fully built out model.
Okay, great, great. Can BI360 be used for financial adjustments?
Yes, so as far as financial adjustments, everything we did within budgeting, we're inputting and storing values within to BI360. Works the same way with financial adjustments. So we have a lot of customers that book some of those entries in BI360. And when you book those adjustments in BI360, you have the capability to run your reports with the adjustments or without the adjustments. Really what you have is a basic BI360 input template where you can record those adjustments into the system.
Okay, terrific. Can multiple users budget at the same time?
Right. So with budgeting, what you'll often see is you might have different budget users with different areas of responsibility, but they might be using the same template. So with expenses, maybe we have 10 different department heads and they all need to budget expenses at the same time. So they can all be in the system, they can all budget at the same time. And the way that it's going to be separated out is because they are budgeting for different departments. So you can certainly have a number of users all in the system, all working together at the same time without any sort of issue.
Okay, great. Can BI360 handle multi-currency reporting?
Yes, so when it comes to multi-currency reporting, there's a couple of options. So when we were running reports, you could see that we had the ability to select different entities. We had a US entity, we had a Canadian entity, and within our demo model, each of those entities has a different currency that they're going to be reporting off of, but we also want to ultimately convert that to US dollars. So depending on where you want to do your currency conversion, if you have multi-currency and you're converting that in the ERP, we can bring that over into BI360 and report off of what's already been converted. Or if you have some information that you need to convert, and an example might be your budget. Maybe you're budgeting in a different currency, but you want to convert that based on some projected rates into US dollars. We have full currency conversion functionality built into the data warehouse that you can use for actuals, budget, or for forecast.
Okay, terrific. And those are the questions that I see in the queue. Let me just check one more time here, make sure I haven't missed anything. No, that looks to be it. Okay, terrific. Stephanie, thank you so much. Appreciate your demonstration today. Appreciate everyone attending the demonstration. You will receive an email shortly after the demo that will include a link back to this webinar today. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, joel.gress@dynamictsi.com, or give me a call. You can also visit our website, dynamictechservices.com. Go to the search box, type in BI360, and hit enter. You'll find a whole bunch of information on BI360. Thank you all once again, and have a wonderful day.